The very first thing that I learned about speech analysis as a graduate student in communication was that you can't simply read or study the text of a speech in isolation. You have to look at the period of time in which the speech was written and delivered, along with the age and the worldview of the speaker. So as you listen to and perhaps decide to analyze my message today, it is 2020 and the speaker is an old lady. As I talk to you about how I see God clearly now, it is understood that if you were to deliver this message, it would be very different from what I'm getting ready to say. Yes, we are all living in 2020, but our worldview and our life experiences are very personal. So perhaps as you hear me talk about my spiritual journey this morning, you might be encouraged to think about your own. That's an important part of what makes Entry Point unique, the recognition that our spiritual journeys are all very different. So this picture represents my first understanding and image of who God is. I actually remember drawing that when I was in Sunday school. I drew it the other day, but I remember that picture. It's indelibly etched in my brain. Based on the verses that I heard in Sunday school and church, I always pictured God as a sort of warrior who had my back. I guess I got those words from Romans 8:31. If God be for us, can you put that back up, Bailey? If God be for us, who can be against us? This pretty much defined how I saw God for a very long time. My protector in a red shirt and blue pants, carrying a sword, who had my back. The very first time that my spiritual training focused on seeing God, I was in 3rd grade. My Sunday school class tripped and stumbled up onto the very massive platform in a very large Baptist church. And we sang a hymn in big church while the offering was being collected. The hymn, a well-known favorite of 3rd graders, Open My Eyes. Open my eyes that I may see glimpses of truth thou hast for me. Place in my hands the wonderful key that shall unclasp and set me free. Seriously, a Sunday school class of 3rd graders asking for their eyes to be opened. And then in true Baptist fashion, we sang all 4 verses. The second verse was, open my ears that I may hear, voices of truth thou sendest clear, and on, and then open my mouth, and then open my heart. Illumine me, Spirit divine. I'm pretty sure not a single one of us in 3rd grade understood the depth of those words that we were forced to memorize and then sing that Sunday morning. However, I know that song today, oh so clearly. I was born into a family that went to church every Sunday. Unless you were very, very sick, you went to church. We all got up, we got dressed in our Sunday best, we went to Sunday school and then church, and then we went home and had eggs and toast every single Sunday. My brother and I never resisted. We knew better. After we moved out on our own and got married, we still attended church. It was in our DNA. Almost every Sunday. Now, the God that I had met and learned about in my childhood was a stern God, a disciplinarian, a punisher. I listened pretty closely to the pastor every time I was in church, all of my life, and I heard that there were some specific ways to behave or you would be in trouble. I heard that there was a heaven and a hell and a judgment, and you needed to be really concerned about the things that you had done wrong, your sins. The God that I became familiar with would forgive me, but I might have to suffer for a while. The God of my childhood was a little bit like a policeman, urging us to follow the rules and ready to do something to us if we didn't. The God of my childhood, for me, was like Santa Claus. I got to ask him for things, but he was always watching to see if I was misbehaving. One day at lunchtime, the children were lined up in the cafeteria of a Christian school, and at the head of the table was a very large pile of apples. Someone had written a note and placed it next to the apples. It read, "Take only one, God is watching. Moving through the line to the other end of the table was a large pile of chocolate chip cookies. So one little boy wrote his own note and he snuck it next to the cookies. Take all you want, Dad's watching the apples. As I became an adult and ventured into different churches, I realized that there were lots of ways of looking at God that had never occurred to me, and lots of churches and lots of religions to help us to do that. I attended a charismatic church for a season, and I experienced a view of God that was brand new to my Baptist ways. People put their hands in the air and they spoke in tongues. I attended a Catholic church and then a Lutheran church for another season, and I discovered the beauty of liturgy and repetition. I experienced a crisis of faith for a season where I had no idea what to believe. And then I came to the conclusion that I didn't have to take my cues from a specific church. I needed to figure out what I believed, if I believed, and why I believed. I needed to try to see God clearly, all by myself. I struggled with many of the same questions that some of you struggle with. Why do children have to die? Why doesn't God answer all of our prayers? Why are some people healed and others aren't? I talked to people, I prayed, I stopped attending church, and I gave myself time. You know, we don't have a manual with which to figure the spiritual things out. There's no place that we can go to besides church to find out who God is. Many people suggest, yes, that we should look in the Bible. Now, the Bible is certainly a place where we can find parables and stories and metaphors that are often difficult to understand. I'm not going to get very deep into this discussion, but at best we are able to glean some general wisdom to apply to our lives when we go to the Bible for instructions. Trying to decipher the Bible sometimes is like opening up instructions for an item you're trying to assemble, and you discover that the directions are written in a different language. Things began to change for me when somehow along the way I gave myself permission to see God not through a church lens, not just on Sunday morning. I began to see God in the everyday, through the kindness and the compassion of other people. I began to see the true nature of who and what God is. God is love. Love makes us better people. Love heals us. Love gives us another chance. Love gives us hope. I see God much more clearly now. God is no longer a guy standing next to me with a sword guarding my back. I have blended what I learned in church with the proof from my own life and what I've seen in others to give me an understanding of God as the source of light and love. God is a force that ripples and flows into the least likely crevices. God is a great lake of hope. We hear and we feel and we find God in the most surprising ways and places, through a song, through a touch, through the eyes of a child, through the tears of a friend, a late night call, a poem, a painting, a sunset, smiles, laughter, all moments of absolute and pure love. Love that sustains us and gives us hope. An amazing, unconditional love. There is no other love like that. 1 John chapter 4 gives us this perspective. God is love. No one has ever seen God. Yet if we love one another, God dwells in us. And God's love is brought to perfection in us. The more we love each other then, the greater becomes our awareness of God. I see God in my daily life. I see God in you. I see God in my dog's eyes. I see God in unexpected kindness and smiles. I look for God. You look for God. And I think we can agree that's hard to do. In an article entitled, "When We Don't See God Clearly," author Chris Hazel has written these very profound words. Actively looking for God in our lives requires a type of double vision. We must see the physical and ordinary of our world, while at the same time the metaphysical and extraordinary. If we can do this, then we can successfully manage the day-to-day of our concrete world while simultaneously journeying as pilgrims on our mystical path. If we take the time, we can see God's grace overlaid on our natural lives like dappled flowers in a field. The people we meet, the gifts and blessings we have, the sufferings that bear fruit at the dawn of spring. We can choose to see all of these things, as instances of God's presence and grace. What about you? What is clear to you now, today, about God? I would encourage each of us to be aware of our beliefs and to know how we see God. I think we should all be able to say a little bit about how we see God. One of the challenging aspects of attending this church is that no one will ever tell you exactly what to believe or how you should behave. That is a bit different from many other churches. We encourage independent thinking and private and individual work here. As I stand on this much lower platform today than that Baptist church, I hearken back, though, to that hymn that I sang in front of that very large church when I was in 3rd grade, and I turned that into a prayer for each of us today. Open my eyes that I may see evidence of you, God, in my life. Open my heart. Illumine me, Spirit divine. May I see and share your incomparable love all around me. May I see you more clearly. Amen. Author Jodi Picoult has written, there are all sorts of experiences that we can't really put a name to. The birth of a child, or the death of a parent, falling in love. Words are like nets. We hope that they'll cover what we mean, but we know they can't possibly hold that much joy, grief, or wonder. Finding God is like that too. If it's happened to you, you know what it feels like. But try to describe it to someone else, and language only takes you so far. Describing how we see God might seem like an impossible task, but I think it's a worthwhile task for each one of us to undertake. Have a great Sunday, and go in peace. Amen.